All right, here we are again talking with my friend Eric Litwiller from the Mental Health Association of South Central Kansas. Hi, Eric. Great to see you.
Great to see you, JJ.
I think this is an important series we're doing. The first one we did had a lot to do with, back to school. Then we started talking about the anxiety of the holidays and how to navigate those. Now, I want to talk about shopping. We're a week and a half away from Christmas, and
Yeah,
it's not just the holidays. Shopping addiction is a thing.
yeah.
I got the scientific word here. I'm going to butcher it. It's like oniomania. Oniomania is what I guess the scientific word for it. But shopping addiction. Why do we become shopping addicts,
Well, there's a saying that we only do the things that serve some purpose in our lives.
Okay.
And I think really at the end of the day, what tends to happen is when people are struggling with any number of things, whether oftentimes it's a mental health concern, it's depression, it's anxiety. We tend to fall back on kind of addictive behaviors. And, a clinician or a therapist could spend hours, I'm sure, kind of taking people backwards in their lives to discover the roots of these things. But addictive behaviors basically kind of fill a gap in our lives that, for whatever reason, our brain has kind of fixated around at some point in the past. And the reward for performing these addictive behaviors, no matter how brief it may be,
Mm-hmm.
provide a little bit of a respite for us to feel better about the rest of our lives. So when we're talking about shopping addiction specifically, what's happening oftentimes is that people are missing something in their lives, that they're not feeling as fulfilled as they want to. In that moment of clicking the buy now button, or that moment of taking a knife and slicing that box open, or that moment of unwrapping the package and holding the new thing in their hand, is providing them with this endorphin rush, this adrenaline rush, that they need to feel a little bit better about themselves for an oh so brief moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the more often we do it, of course, the effect of that is lessened, and so we have to do it more and more often. And that's really where any kind of addictive behavior, shopping included, really comes from.
It's funny. You mentioned the unwrapping of it all. This past weekend at my church at College Hill United Methodist Church, which you have visited in the past to
Yeah.
speak. Pastor Jill. Well, we're in the Advent series, and this past Sunday it was Joy, and she was sharing a story about how she got these new boots
Oh yeah.
delivered that she ordered online, and the joy it brought her to unpack them and look at them and wear them around the house that night and things like that. No, I'm not saying Pastor Joe's a shopping addict, but
Right. No,
it,
I understand.
it speaks to what you just mentioned. It's that
Yeah,
it feels good, right?
it does. It
Uh,
does.
Managed appropriately, it's not a problem. But if, like you said, if you're trying to fill those voids, it can quickly spiral out of control.
Yeah.
Could trauma, could grief, could the loss of someone, could the loss of a marriage bring on excessive shopping?
Yeah, absolutely. Any of those things and many more things could bring on that need. It's like I said, it's just an unfulfilled emotional response. And whether it's no more than a second or two of ripping the box open, or whether it's maybe even a couple hours, or maybe even a few days of enjoying the new thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Really, the key to what you just said is managed appropriately, because I think a lot of people out there, people engage in gambling, people engage in shopping, people engage in alcohol use. But it really truly is a function of how that behavior is managed, our relationship with the behavior, how engaging in that behavior makes us feel, the fallout of choosing to engage in that behavior. All of those things are really crucial in determining whether or not we're talking about a full-blown addictive behavior, or whether we're just talking about something that we get some joy out of and then we move on with our lives. And that's really true of any kind of addictive behavior, or substance use. It really is how we manage it and our relationship with it. And I think a lot of people don't know that. People right now who have addiction are thinking they don't. People who don't have addiction probably are thinking they do.
Yep.
So I think it's really important that we mention that important concept of how we manage it, how we relate to it.
You know, and what you just said kind of leads into my next question about a gray area, because of all the addictions, I think it's fair to say being a shopping addict seems to be the least concerning, almost most acceptable, because we use words like, "Oh, you're a shopaholic. I'm a
Right.
fashionista," things like that. So we use terms like that to almost justify that it's, well, you know what, it's okay, and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And frankly, we use too many mental health words as kind of punchlines of jokes. I think of going to the grocery store and arranging the groceries in your shopping cart. People are like, oh, it's just my OCD.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, OCD is not a punchline any more than shopping addiction is a punchline. But we do tend to use these mental health words to kind of belittle or diminish what really are very serious issues for some people.
Yeah, and I've been called out on that before, and I try very hard now to not
Yeah.
use the OCD part as a punchline, because yeah, it is a serious thing that can be
Oh
debilitating.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How much do you think FOMO, fear of missing out, contributes to one's shopping addiction?
I think that is some of it, but at the same time, if someone is chasing the fear of missing out by deciding that the only way of avoiding missing out is to buy everything, then clearly that's a pretty substantial issue.
Yeah.
I think there may be some one-upsmanship. If the neighbors have the iPhone 9, then I have to have the iPhone 10.
Yep.
I think there is something to that. But again, if that's the high that we're chasing, then that's the method that we're choosing to chase that high. That can get out of hand really quickly.
So let's go shopping.
Yeah.
And look, as this discussion evolves here over the next few minutes, I'm not blaming the stores. I'm not. The stores aren't forcing people to walk in there. So if there are any stores I'm just going to mention some popular ones. I'm not blaming the stores. There's no fault there. But for instance, I shop at TJ Maxx or I shop at Home Goods, and there are the impulse purchase aisles where you stand in the queue and wait for register 5 to bing, now accepting register 5. And they're full of candles and primitive signs and stuffies and dog toys and snacks and salt and pepper, and they're there, and it's just incredibly hard to resist. Would you, however, agree that the stores kind of know what they're doing as far as placing that stuff there, as far as making it hard to resist?
Oh, there's no question. Large retail operations have nailed human behavior down. I mean, they spend millions and millions of dollars every single year to study human behavior and ensure that their stores are laid out in a way to maximize buying behavior. So there is no question. Restaurants do the same thing. I read something not real long ago about restaurants. Think of maybe like an IHOP or something, or an Applebee's, where there's pictures of certain dishes on the menu.
Yep.
I now make it a point to never buy a meal that has a picture on the menu, because I know they're doing that just to appeal to the connection between my eyes and my brain.
Right.
So restaurants do the same thing. But yeah, I mean, stores certainly engage in it. They know exactly what they're doing. Anytime you walk into a store and there are entire aisles that are empty because people are rearranging merchandise, that is absolutely done, at least in large part, because they have discovered something new about human behavior and shopping, and they're trying to rearrange the store to maximize that. There's no question about it. But you're absolutely right at the same time. You can't really blame the stores.
Right.
The stores exist. And I don't reasonably believe that any store or store chain is actively trying to encourage shopping addiction.
Right. They're
So
simply just positioning themselves in the
Right.
best way possible to, exist in this capitalistic world we live in.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So think back to one of the more memorable, most recent impulse purchases you made, Eric.
Oh, okay.
I'm putting you on the spot. Do you have one that comes to mind?
Yeah. I have a weakness for the large big box home improvement stores.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it was a tool that you maybe necessarily weren't going to use right then, but boy, it was great to have in your arsenal.
It was that, because you never know the right tool at the right job for the right moment. Yeah.
And it's so funny you bring that up, because we've talked, and I like to cook, and I think it was a year ago. I this cookware that I really like. The brand is All Clad. It's the best cookware I've ever used.
Oh yeah.
And TJ Maxx has bits and pieces that they sell pretty cheap. So I'm there one day and I find they have these stainless steel ramekins that you would put, baked stuffed lobster in or some sort of seafood dish or scallops, things like that you'd see in a restaurant. And they had like 8 of them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they were a deal. They were like $8 each. I'm like, yeah, those are going into my pantry. So I have them when I need them.
Yep.
This past Sunday, I used them for the very first time a year later. So, impulse purchase, sure, but now I've justified it. So I feel better
Yeah.
about myself.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's that justification that makes us feel like, well, maybe we don't have a problem. See, I used it. Or another one is if it's a couple, if it's you and your person are having a discussion about, boy, why did you buy that? And the other person says it was on sale. How much of a
Yeah.
justification is that line?
I've heard that one a lot. Absolutely. I'm familiar with how that one works. And I'm not sure that's a behavior that we're ever going to quite understand or rationalize. But yeah, we're spending 3 times more money in order to get free shipping is another really big one.
Yep.
Yeah, we are able to rationalize, but when I talk about rationalizing, it kind of brings me back to the concept of how do we feel about that interaction? So when I think about trying to rationalize behavior, there is a huge difference between being open and honest with your spouse about, hey, I spent 3 times more money, but I got free shipping, versus the person who leaves work an hour early to get home to ensure that all of the boxes are off of their porch and hidden in a secret room so that their spouse doesn't see it.
Yeah.
Or the person who kind of laughingly jokes about buying it because it was on sale, versus the person who clicks the buy now button, and then as soon as they enter their credit card and press to enter, now feels this incredible sense of guilt, sense of shame, sense of embarrassment, this internal in the back of their mind understanding that we can't afford this right now,
right,
but I just had to do it and I can't explain why.
Yeah.
So it really does go back to behavior. It really does go back to your relationship with that interaction.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think there could be any environmental factors as to why we buy stuff we really don't need?
I think when we talk about environmental factors, I continue to come back to our mental health issues. And I don't know if that's necessarily what you mean by environmental, but when we're dealing with a childhood trauma is a very common one. When we're dealing with depression, when we're dealing with anxiety, those things exist in our environment for as long as we choose not to get healthy, appropriate, sustainable care for them.
Okay.
So that may not be really environmental in the sense that you mean it, but it is environmental in so much as it exists in our little one person world for as long as we choose to allow it by refusing to go get the mental health care that we need.
Right.
Because the job of a therapist is to kind of peel back the layers of that onion and understand where that behavior is coming from so that we can impose a more healthy and sustainable system of behaviors and thoughts and kind of mental health tools, if you will. As long as we're choosing not to do that, then these unhealthy behaviors like shopping, like gambling, like pornography, et cetera, are going to continue to exist in our environment. And they're just allowing and facilitating the ongoing use of these unhealthy coping skills.
So as you were talking, I'm going to change the word because what I really was trying to convey was this. If we change the word environmental factors to convenience factors, like you hear about food deserts all the time because there's no real grocery store in certain parts of town. The reverse of that is they put all the shops, all the grocery stores, all the things in one area so close to you. Fast food is convenient if you go through the drive-through. I've often had a long argument about how fast food is drive-throughs are contributing to our obesity just because it's simply easy and convenient to rather than get out of the car and walk in. You probably would not go to that restaurant if you had to get out of your car and walk in. So could convenience of shopping nearby, don't have to work very hard for it, could that also contribute?
Yeah, I think it can. I think anything that facilitates a behavior that you're already struggling with certainly doesn't help matters any. But again, I think, at the end of the day, stores are exploiting human behavior, kind of standard, normal human behavior. They know what the average aggregate human being thinks and feels, and how they behave. And at the end of the day, the sort of addiction that we're really talking about is an outlier to normal behavior.
Mm.
It facilitates it just as much as it does for any other human being. But in order for that really to, I think, be a contributing factor, you've already got to be living with that addiction. Now, that's not to say that maybe someone out in Western Kansas, 4 hours away from Wichita and no city anywhere nearer, would maybe not have shopping addiction if they didn't have access to Amazon and that made it so easy to buy things.
Right.
That may be the case. But I don't think it creates that behavior. I think it maybe facilitates it some.
Okay, so I got one more question, and then we'll get into maybe a solution or some best practices, if you will. One of the trends that I find a little unsettling here is the trend retailers are using. It's the buy now, pay later trend. It's not even a credit account. It's some sort of account that allows you to make a larger purchase than you normally would and break up the payment in installments, almost like layaway, if you will.
Right.
That is troubling to me because, again, it's giving into that, well, okay, I can't really afford it. Maybe I don't even really need it, but boy, they've made it really attractive and available to me to make it possible to have it in my house.
I'm not wild about that either, because again, when you think about human behavior, there's a huge difference even between using cash and credit card and the amount people will spend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the concept of that layaway really definitely does kind of exploit people's mentality when it comes to buying things they can't afford.
Mm-hmm.
So there is definitely something to that. I think that has a tendency to prey on folks of lower income. Although folks with lower income tend not to have shopping addiction so quite as much, and maybe that's the reason why right there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not a great trend. I rank it up there almost with the kind of, what do they call them, the payday loan sorts of places.
Yep.
It kind of up there from an ethical, moral standpoint. I struggle with those same things, and it definitely, that is one that more than almost anything else probably does facilitate people's ability to get into financial trouble, which is certainly something that shopping addiction creates. And people who are living with shopping addiction oftentimes know that they're doing these things, but they do them anyway to their own detriment.
Yep.
And anything that facilitates that is definitely an issue.
Yeah, I think if shopping addiction had a gateway drug, it would be those.
Right.
It would be those those payday loans or the buy now, pay later kind of thing. So,
right.
All right. So I'm addicted to shopping, Eric. Best practices that can kind of get me out of this rabbit hole.
Yeah. So, the first thing always with any kind of addictive behavior is to acknowledge it and to understand it. So some of the behaviors to look for, well, first, we already mentioned some of them, things like, leaving work early to go hide the packages, or feeling the guilt and the shame from clicking the buy now button, or putting the thing in your car. People that I have talked to, I've seen behaviors such as they have secret credit cards that their spouse doesn't know about, or secret bank accounts that their spouse doesn't know about.
Right.
I've talked to people who drain retirement accounts, or who drain their children's college education funds. And they know that they understand academically that this is a horrible thing. They can't afford it, but they just can't seem to stop. And so if people are listening and have engaged in those kinds of behaviors, the first step is to really acknowledge that when you're feeling that way, when you're doing when you're hiding all evidence of the behavior so that no one else sees it, no one else notices it, but you are living with that dark cloud over your mind, that is really the first step in acknowledging that, and that, again, that's true of any kind of addictive behavior. But when you have those kinds of feelings, and when you're doing those kind of secretive things to hide what you're engaging in, acknowledging it and recognizing what it is really the first step.
All right. Excellent. That's great advice. So again, shopping addicts, whether you think you're an addict, whether you are an addict, there is help out there. We always champion the idea of, mental health, taking care of it, therapists, talk to somebody, and move on to a better spot where you're not doing things that feel good temporarily, but do a lot of damage in the long run. So
Absolutely. And that is the key is getting to the root of it, talking to a therapist who is trained to understand how to peel back those layers. And invariably, you will find something in the past that has created that kind of behavior that is manifesting very negatively 10, 15, 20 more years later. But if we can find the root of it, we can, again, substitute with much more productive behaviors. And that's really the key. And no one, your friend is not trained to do that. Your spouse is not trained to do that. Your pastor's not trained to do that. That's what a therapist is for, is to peel back those layers and find that root cause.
all right. So how can we find out more from the Mental Health Association of South Central Kansas?
Always visit the website first, I think, mhask.org. And certainly give us a call anytime, 652-2590. That is the number directly to our outpatient counseling center out at Harry and Webb. And you can come in, do an initial assessment. The therapist will kind of make a determination about what sort of treatment plan is needed going forward and connect you to a therapist in that office.
Excellent. All right. So this is an important series. Mental health series will continue after the first of the year. We're going to get into the pressures and the anxiety and the stress and the pitfalls of New Year's resolutions and how they can.
Yeah, huge one.
All right. Very good. We'll talk after the first of the year. Till then, happy holidays to you, Eric, and I always appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.